The grand chandelier above the dining hall cast its warm glow over the polished marble floors, illuminating the gleaming crystal glasses and the carefully arranged silverware. 22 guests mingled in the lavish space, their laughter and polite chatter filling the air. The scent of truffle risotto and fresh roses lingered, a symbol of my parents' wealth and obsession with appearances. Yet, beneath the glittering surface, I felt a storm brewing. I had spent weeks preparing for this dinner, a small gesture to celebrate my latest professional milestone. A promotion I'd earned through sleepless nights, relentless dedication, and ideas my parents had long dismissed as childish fantasies. I had hoped, naively perhaps, that tonight would be different. That for one evening, I could be seen as their daughter, the capable, determined woman I had become. But the moment I entered the room, that fragile hope shattered. "Everyone, gather around," my father announced with a booming voice, a forced cheerfulness masking the tension in his eyes. Guests shifted, plates clinking, and I walked toward the center of the room, trying to smile through the unease curling in my stomach. And then it happened. My mother's gaze fixed on me, sharp and unforgiving. "Darling," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "why don't you tell our friends about your latest misadventure? You know, before you embarrass yourself again." I froze. Heat flushed my cheeks. Whispers floated like tiny daggers across the room. My father chuckled, leaning in conspiratorially. "Yes, tell them, idiot daughter. Let everyone hear how hopeless you are." Time slowed. I could feel the stares of every guest on me, the sharp edge of humiliation slicing through my chest. My mother's lips curled into a satisfied smile as if she had delivered the perfect punchline. Lauder, polite and awkward at first, erupted. I wanted to disappear, to sink through the marble floor and escape the world. I had spent years trying to prove myself, earning accolades and respect outside the suffocating walls of this house, only to have my parents reduce me to a punchline in front of 22 people I barely knew. The sting of betrayal was sharper than I expected. It wasn't just humiliation. It was the cruel confirmation that the people who should have loved and supported me were invested in nothing but my embarrassment. I kept my head high, forcing a smile that did not reach my eyes. Inside, anger simmered, a cold, relentless fire that would not be extinguished. The whispers continued. The laughter rolled over me like waves, but I felt something awaken in that moment, a clarity of purpose I had never known. They had underestimated me one last time, and they would soon learn that underestimating me was their gravest mistake. Tonight, I had been made the idiot daughter. But tomorrow, the world would see the truth, and when it did, no one would remember my parents' laughter. I retreated to my sanctuary, the small, sunlit room at the back of the house that had become my refuge from their constant criticism. Here, the world outside seemed quieter, softer, and for a moment, I let myself breathe. The echoes of the dinner still rang in my ears, my mother's sharp tone, my father's laughter, the whispered judgments of 22 strangers who had watched me shrink beneath the weight of their words. For hours, I sat in silence, replaying every moment. How long had I endured this? The subtle jabs disguised as advice, the outright dismissals masquerading as concern, the way they took pleasure in undermining my accomplishments. Each memory stung like a fresh wound. And yet, beneath the pain, an ember glowed, a stubborn, unyielding ember of defiance. I pulled out my journal, the one my parents had once scoffed at as childish scribbles. I had filled it over the years with ideas, business plans, and reflections on the world. Now, as I leafed through its pages, I realized something crucial. My parents had never truly seen me. Not really. They had reduced my ambitions, my intellect, my very being to a label. Hudiat daughter. And in doing so, they had underestimated me. Anger simmered beneath my skin, but it was no longer wild or uncontrolled. It was sharp, precise, a weapon in the form of clarity. I would not respond with childish shouting or desperate pleading. That would satisfy them, allow them to feel superior. No, my revenge had to be thoughtful, deliberate, and undeniable. I began mapping out their world, the investments, the deals, the intricate web of business and social influence that had been their pride. I knew enough to see the cracks, the dependencies, the fragile reputations, the arrogance that blinded them to reality. My mind raced with possibilities. Every late night email, every overlooked contract detail, every careless word could be used. And I would use them, not recklessly, but like a master chess player planning 10 moves ahead. But it wasn't just strategy that burned inside me. It was the desire to reclaim my dignity, to stand not just equal but superior to the people who had humiliated me. I imagined the look on their faces when they realized they had lost, not through luck or misfortune, but because they had underestimated the very person they had scorned. By the time night fell, I had a plan forming in my mind, careful, elegant, and unstoppable. It would not be immediate, patience was part of the design. Revenge, I realized, was sweeter when it was measured, when it built slowly until the moment of reckoning arrived. I closed my journal and sat back, a calm determination settling over me. The ember inside me had grown into a fire, and I knew it would not be extinguished until justice, my justice, was served. My parents had thought that calling me an Hudiat would diminish me, silence me, and keep me in my place. But they had no idea. They had just ignited the very force that would one day bring them to their knees. The days that followed were quiet, almost ordinary. But beneath the surface, my mind was anything but. Every conversation, every social gathering, every casual glance from a family friend became an opportunity to observe, to gather information, to map the weaknesses my parents had always assumed I could never see. They had built their world on appearances and charm, believing their reputation was untouchable. They were wrong. I began with the $2 million investment they were so proud of. A high-profile business deal that would cement their standing in the city's elite circles. My father had boasted about it endlessly. My mother had dazzled potential partners with her polished smile, and together they had believed it was untouchable. But I knew the truth. They were relying on flimsy contracts, vague promises, and a network that could easily be manipulated by someone who understood the intricate machinery behind it all. Each morning, I reviewed the deal, dissecting every clause, every handshake, every whispered assurance. I discovered small cracks, deadlines that were unrealistic, dependencies that no one seemed to track, and key investors who were growing skeptical of my parents' claims. And with each revelation, a plan began to take shape, subtle, surgical, and irreversible. I didn't confront them, didn't hint at what I knew. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I played the long game. A missed detail here, a whispered rumor there, small but deliberate delays, all executed without a trace pointing back to me. The beauty of it was that I could watch my parents, so confident in their control, begin to falter without ever realizing why. Their own arrogance was working against them. The thrill was intoxicating. I wasn't just plotting revenge, I was proving to myself that all the years of being dismissed, ridiculed, and belittled had not broken me. They had refined me. Every late night strategy session, every careful calculation, every moment of restraint was a testament to the power I had honed in silence. Yet, even as I orchestrated the unraveling of their empire, I struggled with fleeting doubts. Was I crossing a line? Was revenge worth the moral cost? I paused at times, staring at my reflection, and asked myself if the satisfaction of seeing them humbled could outweigh the risk of losing a part of myself in the process. But each memory of that dinner, each echo of "idiot daughter," steeled my resolve. The answer was clear yes. By the time the first cracks began to show, emails unanswered, investors growing anxious, miscommunications piling up, I knew the moment of reckoning was approaching. My parents' confidence, which had seemed so unshakable, was starting to crumble, and the irony, delicious and poetic, was that they would have no idea who, or what, had started it all. I leaned back in my chair, letting a slow, satisfied smile spread across my face. The fire that had been ignited in me months ago was now a controlled blaze, one that would burn until my parents had no choice but to confront the truth. The idiot daughter was the one holding all the power, and soon they would feel it. The day the deal unraveled arrived quietly, almost innocuously, but the consequences were seismic. My parents had arrived at the office that morning, brimming with their usual confidence. Believing nothing could touch the empire they had built on charm, appearances, and their perceived brilliance. They had no idea the world I had been shaping in silence, no inkling that every small misstep, every tiny crack in their plan, had been orchestrated. It started with an email from one of the investors. The tone was polite, professional, but unmistakably sharp, dripping with disappointment. Deadlines had been missed. Key documents were inconsistent. Confidence in their leadership was eroding faster than they could comprehend. I watched from a distance, careful not to let even the smallest trace of satisfaction betray me. My phone buzzed with updates, messages from contacts who owed me favors, all confirming the cascading effect. Each miscommunication, each delayed response, each overlooked detail I had planted was now multiplying on its own. The 200 million investment, the deal they had boasted about endlessly, the deal they believed untouchable, was slipping through their fingers like water. When I saw my mother's hands trembling as she reread a critical contract, and my father's jaw tighten in disbelief, a quiet, almost imperceptible smile tugged at my lips. This was not about money alone. It was about vindication. For years, they had belittled me, mocked me, and reduced my worth to a cruel joke. Tonight, in front of the very world they had invited to witness their pride, the tables had turned. Later that evening, the guests from that infamous dinner returned for a more casual gathering, though none could have predicted the outcome. My parents attempted to maintain their poise, trying to cover the disaster with practiced smiles, but whispers of the failed deal spread like wildfire. Every polite nod, every cautious glance, carried the silent acknowledgement their reputation had been tarnished, their confidence exposed as hollow. I approached them then, quietly, my voice calm but sharp. "Do you remember the dinner when you called me the idiot daughter, in front of everyone?" I asked, letting each word linger. Their faces drained of color, the reality dawning on them that I, not the world, had engineered their downfall. "I've spent years being underestimated, dismissed, ignored. But every idea you laughed at, every plan you dismissed, I've nurtured and perfected. And tonight, you see what happens when the so-called idiot has all the control." My words landed like stones in still water, rippling through their pride. They had lost 2,000 million. Their carefully constructed image of superiority lay in ruins. And I was no longer their punchline. I was the author of my own power, the force they had refused to acknowledge. As they sank into stunned silence, I felt a strange sense of closure, a bitter, sweet satisfaction that no words could fully capture. Revenge had been more than retribution, it had been liberation. I had transformed humiliation into triumph, scorn into strategy, and betrayal into a lesson they would never forget. And for the first time, I smiled freely, unburdened and unstoppable, knowing that the Sudiot daughter was finally, irrevocably in charge.